any feedback, comments, or questions that you have when you're here. You do want to be muted when you're not speaking, though, just to prevent that background noise. As you know, all sessions are recorded so that you can share them with your teammates and you can revisit the content later, and they're stored on our website, so you can review any of the sessions that we've previously had on the COHHIO, Ohio Department of Education Youth Homelessness landing page. So these slides will be available for you there briefly after the session. We do breakout rooms sometimes in this community of practice, but we're not using any breakout rooms today, so don't worry too much about that. And of course, if you have any audio issues, just a quick reminder for those of you that have just jumped in, if you're not seeing live transcript or closed captioning, check your toolbar. You can turn that on if you need that, just for a little extra boost and making sure you're hearing and seeing everything that's coming through. And then of course, if you have any other audio or video issues, you can log off or log back in. You can shoot me a quick email. You can send me a private chat. And we will do whatever we can to make sure that everything is working for you. Looks like maybe somebody is having a little bit of audio video issues coming in and back out. So I'm going to give folks who maybe need to do that in and back out a quick second so we're not leaving anybody behind. So if you can hear me and things are moving, I will know that in just a second, because I'm going to ask you if you would please. I would like to invite you to share your name, invite you to share your pronouns if you feel comfortable doing so, the school district that you represent, and then if you would just share one word that describes your summer mood. Not really a rule on the one word. If there's a couple of words, that's fine too. In the chat, let us know who you are and who's here with us today. That would be awesome. Just take a moment and put in the chat your name, your pronouns, your district, and one word that describes your summer mood. Welcome, Molly, and good to see you again, Jill. I'm glad you're getting that relaxed summer mood. Love to hear from others. We'll take some time here. Always nice to see a blend of educational service centers, staff, and also K-12 district staff. So good to have all of you here. A couple folks from the Ohio Department of Education as well. Great to have you here. Where's those summer moods, man? I want to know how folks are grooving this summer. How's the vibe out there for you? I'm with Erin, obviously. I'm a little animated about it. I love summer too. Adventurous, I like that. Great. Lawrence County, peaceful down there. Yes, that sounds nice. I need to get down there and get back in the trails. It's been a little while. Super happy to have you here with us today. Sounds like summer is going well in Cincinnati. Lots of fun stuff. That's awesome. Yes, I like that. I like that. Cool and relaxed. Totally. All right. Well, thank you all for checking in with us, letting us know where you're coming from around the state today, how you're kind of coming in the door. Want to make sure you know who's also here alongside us. Erin Upchurch from Kaleidoscope Youth Center, which I've been saying KYC so much lately that I had to like kind of remind myself to say it all the way through. So getting better and better with my alphabet soup problems. I always appreciate being called out on that because I struggle with it. So I'm not going to go into a big, long spiel about Erin. It's been such a pleasure to work with her and get to know Kaleidoscope and some of her team and some of her staff. We collaborate on a lot of different projects from an advocacy perspective, data collection, programming on the ground, of course, some of this training, technical assistance, support. So super grateful to have her here in this space. And I'll just turn it over to you, Erin, to say hello. And then if there's anybody else from your team that you want to quickly introduce, that's totally cool. And then you can just flip it back over to me and we'll keep going for a little bit here. So please go ahead.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Lisa said, my name is Erin Upchurch. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the executive director for Kaleidoscope Youth Center. And don't worry, we say KYC all the time. And I actually have to also remember to say the full thing because not everybody knows what that means. And it's just me here today. Our team, actually our community-based wellness team is meeting with, we do a bi-weekly meetup with our folks in housing and case management. So my team is there today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for stepping out of that and being with us today and kind of stretching over to the education system, right? So super appreciative of having you. So just wanted to check in with who our attendees are and also who our guest is for today, but let's wrangle back into how we're going to spend our time. So we did a little bit of introduction, just making sure everybody knows everybody. We're going to do a quick little warm-up welcome activity, just spending a little more time, seeing how everyone's doing this summer and how things are landing for you. And then we're going to reflect a little bit, like I've been alluding to since the very beginning of jumping on this call. We're going to kind of revisit a little bit of what we've been doing in community of practice. And I want to invite you all to share what this experience has been like for you. If this is your first time being here, that's totally cool. You can share a little bit about that and what led you to joining this session, what spoke to you in the emails, what's not going so well in terms of communication or could be improved, what content is content that you really want to dig more into. And so we're going to spend some time on that. And then Erin is going to give us some really important data-driven information about marginalized young people and how we can best support them, best culturally and competently meet them where they're at. And then we will do some question and answer and reflection with Erin here. So she'll be available to take some questions and do some feedback from you all. And then we'll just close and make sure you know what's coming down the pike. And as always, we will leave you with some resources. So that's our rundown for today. And let's just kind of keep with this mode of sharing, okay? Because we're going to keep easing into sharing. So let's share a little bit about where we're at. You guys, this is probably not new to you. I like to use the weather report a lot because, as you know, whoopsie, our brain likes to speak in pictures. So take a look at some of the pictures on the screen. And this time, you can definitely put the letter that correlates with the picture that is resonating with you today in the chat. But I'm going to actually pause for a minute and see if anybody wants to come off mute and share a little bit about why they're resonating with that particular image. So I'm going to look in the chat. Looks like we've got a lot of F and a lot of B, which is really great to see. And there's no wrong or right answer here. But I want to just give folks a moment to share a little bit about why they're landing where they're landing to. I just put in an example of what that could look like in the chat, right? So lead by example, right? So for me, I'm kind of resonating with letter E right now. I like how it sort of gives this like foggy, can't quite see through, but we know that there's some liquid there, right? And so that's really resonating with me because in my own sort of world right now, it's kind of get through the day. There's some limited sort of predictability on what's to come. And so when I think about that, E really speaks to me. You know, there's a part of me that's really jiving with F right now too, because I love the warm weather and summer. But when I really think about today and how things are going for me, I'm really leaning into E. So I'm gonna read some of the things that are in the chat here in a second, but I'm gonna go back on mute and hope that somebody else will come on and share a little bit about where they're landing today.
I can share. Did I go over anybody or is this okay? Okay.
Oh, it is very.
Can you, okay, so I'm good. Sorry, we've got 3 people in the same thing in the same room. So just want to make sure. Yeah, we're a little C, D, and E over here today. We have a meeting shortly where we expect a total restructuring that will reduce our benefits and pay significantly. So that's Project Connect, and we're just feeling a little down because we know that that's coming in the next hour or two, and it also is why we cannot stay on the meeting. So if you see us disappear, our apologies. We got to go meet with HR and see what they hand us.
Well, Project Connect team, thank you so much for your vulnerability, expressing a little bit about what you're going through today and what's on the back of your mind. I hope this meeting can provide a little bit of a space filler to get to that moment. And I'm sending you a lot of grace and patience, the whole team, for that conversation. But really, really, really appreciate you just reflecting and sharing with the group, because that's really what this group is all about, to be here to support each other, to celebrate our wins, but also to kind of uplift some of the things that we're having to deal with on a regular basis. So really appreciate you sharing.
I thought it would be a safe place to share. And just to, the other backdrop is we're in a union negotiation that's very challenging. So our situation with Project Connect has been looped into that union fight. So we are, hanging in.
Well, thank you again for sharing and for the update. And we're here for you. And we look forward to continual updates about how you all are getting through. And if there's anything we can do to support your efforts, let us know, please. You're getting a lot of love in the chat, so definitely check that out. Sometimes it's nice to just have those peers having your back before you walk into something where you might need to remember that you have peers that have your back. Anybody else want to share what's going on?
I'll share. I put F as my kind of state of being today, and more just because it's encouraging to look at flower blossoming. It might not be the real story today, but it's keeping me encouraged.
That's great. And it's important to be encouraged. And it's kind of nice that we have this brain that I sometimes think of as a computer that can be soothed just by looking at an image, even if it's just a little bit, right? So we can be grateful for those tiny neurobiological things that we can do to uplift our energy a little bit in the moment.
Absolutely.
Lots of love for Project Connect in the chat. Yes.
Lisa, I'll also add, because this is our small targeted group, I've been doing listening sessions with ARP1 grantees. And so this sunflower kind of resonates because the seeds are in the middle, right? And I've just heard the power of planting seeds for a whole year, and just what is coming of that. So that's really encouraging too. So.
Thanks so much for sharing, Susanna. All right, well, we'll keep going here. More wanting to hear more from you on some other stuff. So maybe these things will be more in your wheelhouse to discuss. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these couple of slides because I want to keep reflecting on where we're headed with community practice and where we've been. But it's really important to make sure that we're living by our principles and the things that we've put in place as our group norms, right? And so we usually visit these before every session in the HomeRoom network, as well as in the McKinney-Vento network. So they should be getting pretty regular for us, right? Number one is so important. We recognize that all communities and districts are unique, but have some shared challenges and can learn from each other's experiences. Today, we're really going to be digging into the strategies that improve equity, including racial and LGBTQ plus equity. So really thinking about number 3 today and looking forward to diving more into that. And I just appreciate, just from the shares that I've heard today, I'm just going to call out a couple of these, not belabor them, but just elevate one more, and really feeling that number 4, we are solution oriented and creative in our planning and problem solving, that we're showing up and being vulnerable with each other, and we're also trying to find solutions, right? And we may not have the solution right now, but even just a willingness to be open to a solution is a positive way to have community practice work for us. So just a quick reminder on those. And then in terms of our agreements, again, more just sort of norms for our group. We check in and check out, meaning not everything necessarily lands with us. So we take the things that do and we can leave the rest. We're listening for understanding. We expect and accept non-resolution. We remember that both and thinking, 2 things can be true at the same time. We're aware of intent and impact, making space and taking space, and then of course our safe terms. So we always like to review these, especially when we have a guest in this space, just so it's clear what our sort of guidelines for how our community operates. But they are always a living, breathing, foundational component of community of practice. So if there's ever a time when we want to adjust any of these agreements or values, add or change, that is absolutely something that we can do. So if you feel like additional things or changing of things might be helpful in this space, we can absolutely do that. So what I want to kind of do now is reflect a little bit on some of the sessions that we've already had in HomeRoom Network. So I know many of you attend HomeRoom Network, and you also attend the Ohio McKinney-Vento Community of Practice. So if you've attended both, then I think, Ami and Evelyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this makes a total of 5 community of practice sessions that have happened between both communities. But right now we're just on this screen, we're just looking at the homeroom sessions. So this is our 3rd homeroom session, but if you've attended both, then you've attended 4 total sessions, and this is your 5th session today. So what I want to do, that's a lot of sessions, it's a lot of content. I wanted to just kind of revisit some of the work that we've done here in homeroom and see how that's going for folks, what's working, what's not working. So our first session was back in March, and that is where we did a lot of sort of explaining what community of practice is, establishing those group norms, establishing who the audience is in this community of practice, who attends, what is their role, what's kind of this whole goal around community of practice. So that was really session 1 in March. And then back in April, we did a session specific to coordinating at the local level with the COC. So this is where we dug into who our key points of contact are. And I'm sorry, this wasn't just about connecting with the COC, it was also other system partners, but we really focused on the continuum of care, or the COC. And this is, you might remember, this is the session where we talked a lot about the building blocks, and we had the images of the bricks, and we sort of talked about how we build this foundational network and partnerships between cross systems, because ending homelessness is not a movement that will happen with one system or one provider or one school, right? The whole kind of overarching concept of that collaboration is it's about all of these systems and all of us sort of moving in the same direction is truly the movement to prevent and end youth homelessness. It's not a lone wolf movement with one person taking on all of the challenges. So we really looked at the critical elements of collaboration. And then of course, this is what we're going to be getting into today. But before we do, just a couple of questions for you here on the screen. You all can see these. These are all a few different ways of asking you how this is going for you and how we can improve it. So just kind of starting with the first couple of questions, how is this community of practice going for you? And if it is going well or if it isn't, right? And then what's really standing out to you as working well. So going to take another minute, invite you to come off mute and share and or put in the chat how this is going for you, what's working or what's not working. So we'll take a second and do that.
Hi, Lisa. This is Shayna from Akron. How are you? I am going to just share that one of the things that has worked well for me just recently is connecting with our continuum of care, which we've always been connected with. But we made a switch recently that's made a big impact on our relationship. And it was the continuum of care. I now have access to their HMIS. It proved to me not very useful for a long time because I had to go into the system and like look specific my name and then figure out what happened with the family. And I could have just emailed our contact for that before. So I thought, how do we make this HMIS a little bit more useful? Just recently, they added a question to their intake process of, do you have students in Akron Public Schools? And so now there's a report that I can pull that lists families who say yes to that question. And we have just started calling. It's a weird time of the school year to start calling families, but we just got access. We have 3 families that we did not identify prior to this that have really complicated situations, and we're going to be able to jump in. So that is a big difference, and we're catching families that we would not have caught before.
Wow, that's great. Do you feel like, I definitely want to dig into more about the custom element, but do you feel like the session where I was really trying to, and our guests, Aubrey and Karen, we were really trying to talk about how to rethink those collaborations with a fresh mindset? Do you feel like that was helpful at all? Because I hear you saying like, we've had that relationship, right? Like it wasn't news to us that we needed to work with the COC, Lisa, but I'm wondering if there was like an element of community of practice that helped like figure out what a better ask would be, or like hone in on specific relationships. Do you want to talk about that a little bit in terms of like mindset or anything?
Yeah, for sure. I think that hearing from other people as well is kind of like they were working with their COCs in like kind of a more effective way and finding it helpful. And I've always kind of been like, oh, I know them, I work with them, you know, but it's like, what is that? How is that helping my families right now? So that was big. Another piece recently, you guys talked about kind of some braiding of funding. Yeah, and there's some youth funding through the Ohio Department of Health that we had, you know, just had a meeting this morning about the new round that's coming in and how to get a little bit of creative with that with youth too. So met with Vanessa from Summit County recently, and I think we've got some good things coming out of this. So I appreciate it.
That's awesome. I'm so excited that your COC and your HMIS admin was willing to consider custom elements and really thinking about how we don't have to only do the things that are prescribed by the federal government. You know, we have access to the system. We can do customizations. We can make adjustments. And at the local level, that seems to be so effective. Sometimes that's tricky at the state level with so many different HMIS implementations, but the way that you like just cut through the red tape, you're like, look, this isn't really helping. I can just call somebody and get this way faster. So how can we use this technology to our advantage, right? So that's awesome. definitely want to check in, see if anybody else has anything they want to share as a takeaway or reflection.
One of the things I just wanted to share is that, you know, going into just in addition with the COC is that at our last meeting, we talked about doing an additional where we did the point in time count in, I believe, February. It was raining, so our counts weren't exactly, you know, where they usually are. So we have decided that, you know, going together with the different organizations and seeing, you know, doing our own count in August after school is back, and just seeing that working together mainly with our community action and again, the other organizations, and just going around to all areas in the county rather than just the particular area that we were allowed to go in that day, and working with them to like we call it PICA in Pickaway County, the community action, and they have a mobile unit. So we're going to go to the different areas and be able to help people set up, like if they need the additional resources that the community action can do. We'll be able to get more accounts as far as what families are in school that maybe are doubling up. So I mean, it's just a tremendous effort and all the resources coming together to serve these families. So I mean, we're doing a subcommittee for that and just planning it over the summer. So I'm very excited about that. Just wanted to share that. So thank you.
That's awesome, Dawn. I look forward to hearing more about that. And if you need any resources at all to help form your account, don't hesitate to reach out for a little bit of technical assistance on that. We've got a lot of resources around counts. We've had some really successful 100-day challenges in Ohio too that could probably provide some lessons learned around actions that can be taken after the count too. So definitely thank you for providing that update, and let's keep talking about that because that sounds like important community work that's going on there. That's multi-system. So that's awesome. Also wanted to uplift Mary in the chat. Go ahead. Sorry, we're about to say something. Oh, okay. I just want to make sure. I just wanted to uplift the this quote or this comment in the chat. I have to say that this is such a multifaceted issue with difficult solutions. It's easy to get frustrated. I like having this group so that I know that our county is not alone and there are others in the state that have the same concerns. And so I wanted to uplift that because I think that's like the heart of the word community, right? That we feel in community with each other, and we don't feel alone because we can't do this alone, right? So that's what we're really focused on here. So I want to just invite folks, any of these other questions on the screen that are speaking to you about how community of practice is going. Definitely love the things that are spurring ideas. I can't tell you how much that excites me because so much work goes into putting these sessions together for you all. So the fact that it's creating some little sparks, it's planting some seeds, it's creating some new mindsets for how we think about things. Thank you, because that's what we're trying to do, right? And so if you're not quite there yet in your community, that's okay, right? Sometimes we need to just hear what others are doing so that we can have ideas, right, and see what's scalable in our community. But that's what being here is sort of all about, sharing about those things. So definitely keep uplifting what's working. I want to take a quick second and check in on things that maybe could strengthen our community of practice. And I want to also couch that with things that you want to kind of dig deeper on, right? So one of the beautiful things about Homeroom is we put a lot of energy into lining up what we're going to discuss until the fall, but then we have a lot of flexibility in terms of where we want to go with this group and what types of conversations we want to have and discussions we want to have. So one of the reasons I wanted to pause here today and check in about that is I want to make sure that we're planning our upcoming months of community of practice with your ideas in mind. So if there's certain things that are really on your mind that you haven't seen on the calendar, or you haven't seen on the website, or you really want to elevate that are out there, come off mute and share with me what we could do to strengthen, where you want us to spend time, and just rattle off some of those worries and those things that are on your mind that you need more resourcing and community around. Okay, that's good feedback, Jill. On the follow-up surveys, yeah, okay. So sometimes when I've sat through, yeah, like a 2-hour, 1-hour, 3-hour all-day session, and then they're like, boom, give me all the answers to this survey. It's like, you know what? I've been listening to you all day. I'm not going to give you anything. I'll come back to this later, right? So yeah, that's really good feedback. Like maybe at the end of the session isn't my most ideal time to tell you how things are going because my brain's a little fried and I'm thinking about all the content. So that's great. We will keep working on multiple feedback options. And let me just say, like, if that's the space that you're in when that survey pops up, just, you can NA it, right? You can just NA it and don't feel like we're going to judge you for not giving a ton of survey information. And we will follow up with more flexible survey options that you can fill out at any time. And I'm trying to add to our listserv on a regular basis, just an open feedback questionnaire. So if you want to provide feedback on anything at any time, you can do that, but we'll keep being strategic about how we do that specific to community of practice too. So yeah, great feedback. That's the kind of feedback we're looking for here. What makes this more enjoyable and less taxing, right? Like what are good ways to reach you? So that's great feedback. Also, Andrea, thank you for the positivity, and thank you for uplifting how like what we talk about in here is meant to be shared with those on your team, right? Like if there are the ideas and resources that we're coming up with in here, share those with the team, make sure they're getting out to folks. So appreciate you elevating, like things don't just have to live in this Zoom meeting. We can share this content, we can revisit these conversations, we can have a technical assistance call, we can do more with what we've got. Any other comments, feedback about how community of practice is going right now? I would like ideas on how we can help unaccompanied youth. There are no shelters that will take them in our county. Great, okay. Yes, that's an important one. Unaccompanied youth under the age of 18, we can definitely focus in on that topic. That is high on our radar, so definitely glad that you're elevating it here. And that's a great example of what I'm looking for. So if you all have other topics that you have in mind or other subject areas that you want to focus on in community of practice, throw them out there. We are going to be doing this for a while, many more months. So we can go deeper, right? We can go much deeper. So if there are things that you want to really dive into, let me know what they are. I'm going to flip over to the next slide that just gives some more questions about where you want to dig into deeper, what you're hoping to gain, all kind of framed around this same concept of how is community of practice going, how can we improve it for you, what's working, what's not working. I'm so open to tweaking this and really creating a space that's your space that you feel like you have ownership over and that you have a lot of input into how we work through things. I would like, okay, yeah, that's the one we looked at. Okay. Well, I want to invite you throughout the session to keep chewing on this a little bit. If you have ideas, you can throw them in the chat as we go on and through the material today. And this is just a starting place of opening this door. Maybe you've just had a really long day. Maybe you have a meeting immediately after this. Maybe you're thinking about other stuff. So you are more than welcome to shoot me an email about any thoughts that you have on this as well. And we'll keep checking in on this in Community of Practice. So thank you to those of you that have shared. And thank you to those of you that haven't shared and are still thinking about it a little bit, because I appreciate your chewing on it and reflecting on it. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So we need to just keep learning, and that's how we keep growing. So super appreciate a little bit of reflection time and kind of easing into our session today. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I'm gonna invite Erin to go ahead and pull up her slides if she wants to, unless you want me to. Totally up to you, whatever's most comfortable.
I am fine with sharing my own. So let me get those ready.
Yeah, take your time.
There they are. All right, are you ready for me just to jump right in? Great.
I think so, yep.
Let's get to slideshow. It was actually enjoy listening to some of those, some of that feedback, and especially loved, the conversation around making adjustments at the local level. That's actually really what the core of what I'm going to be talking about today is, looking at how we're able to do things here locally or in Central Ohio. But I love brainstorming and always finding ways to. I always tell my team, we got to be strategic. So thank you so much for having me today. As I said, my name is Erin. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the ED of Kaleidoscope Youth Center. I'm also a social worker. I've been in practice for, I think this is my 23rd year, and I've worked amongst many different systems, but have consistently worked with youth, families, and community practice is my favorite thing. Is to look at systems and see how we can bring things together and finding those gaps and holes and see what's missing. So I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today. Well, let's see if they'll let me advance. Before that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Kaleidoscope Youth Center, just to give some framing and context. So I'm going to play this short video for you. Hopefully you'll be able to hear. My browser is up to date, it says. That's not what I need. Let me stop sharing for a moment and try a different way. One moment. So funny how much we've had to learn to be patient and slow things down in our new-ish world. All right, here we go. So I will share my screen. And we're going to start this over. All right, there we go.
I don't think there's a volume.
I don't hear any sound.
Yeah, there's no sound.
You didn't hear it the whole time?
No.
No.
there's no sound.
Y'all are really patient people to sit there. Let me see. Well, maybe we'll just come back to that and I'll try. I know there's some different ways, but I want to respect your time. You obviously got to see how beautiful it is. That is so weird.
If you have a shareable link, I can try sharing it with sound at the end too, if we have time, if that's helpful.
Yeah, during questions,
Except-
during Q&A, I'll bring it back up. We'll be fine for now.
Okay.
So, alrighty, let's try this again. So who we are as an organization. So that video really was just about kind of our practice and approach to working with young folks. And it's about belonging. That's really what it comes down to. All these different things that are our youth. And it's really all youth experience. At our core, it's about belonging and young folks being able to come and be who they are and have their basic needs met. We are the largest and longest standing organization in the state of Ohio to serve LGBTQI+ youth and young adults. And that acronym does stand for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. And we add the plus because we know that gender identity, expression, and sexuality is actually extremely expansive and fluid. And so we acknowledge that with the plus on there. Our youth do tend to utilize the word queer to describe their identities, as it encompasses more than identity. It's typically around politics, kind of values and approaches to things. So you may hear me use that word queer interchangeably because that is how our youth and I myself identify. But what I always like to say to allies is make sure you understand and know that that's how somebody identifies before using that language. We do work in partnership across the state. We are a statewide organization. We are headquartered in Columbus, Ohio, but we strive to always be youth-led, youth-inspired, and youth-informed in all that we do. We use best practices around trauma-informed and healing-centered care with our positive youth development programming, and really focus on increasing protective factors. And why that's important is we so often talk about reducing risk factors, but we want to actually increase those risk factors. And we like to say placing our youth at promise. And so, having affirming resources, making referrals, and utilizing crisis intervention. And then, lastly, we do have a dedicated physical space here in Central Ohio. There are a couple other smaller centers across the state, but we know here in Central Ohio, as resource rich as we are in Franklin County in particular, there are no other programs that are solely dedicated to serving the specific needs and experiences of our young people. And that's why we're important. And that also came up with some of our housing programs I'm going to talk about later, because some people would say, you can't do things just for LGBTQI youth, and you actually can, and it actually is okay. I appreciate that feedback. I do want to invite you all. I know there's a Q&A section at the end. I love conversation and dialogue, and I also know there's a lot of shared wisdom and experience here in this, in our time together. So if you do have a question, feel free to come off mute. I can't really see the chat too well, but I'll try to pay attention if you do have a question or need me to clarify things as we're going. This is our value statement as an organization. How we're informed of restorative and transformational justice, racial justice, intersectionality, anti-oppression, and trauma-informed healing care. And this part feels really important too, that we believe that people, including our young folks, are experts in their own lives, which is really a different approach, because what we call adultism is essentially believing that youth, young people, minors don't know anything, or that their experiences aren't real to them. And it's really challenging to resist the urge of like, what do you know about that? And I will say I'm a parent to an 18-year-old that just graduated high school and a 20-year-old. And as much as I adhere to being anti-adultist, sometimes it is hard when we're working with youth and things were like, I don't want you to do that. We want to try to stop them. But what we've really learned is becoming a soft landing for them can be the most impactful ways of showing up. But they're also seeking to challenge those systems of power. And so when we talk about local level adjustments and solutions, sometimes it is going against the same systems are those systems of power that don't work for everyone. And then this is our theory of change. And again, I always think this is important because it helps us stay level set. And then when we talk about programs or the ways that we're doing things, we always come back to our theory of change and our values and mission statement to make sure that we're staying aligned. And so we know that safety is the number one thing. Human beings are wired for safety, survival, and connection. And what often thwarts that ability to connect is the lack of safety. And so people being in survival mode, they don't get to experience the love and belonging and esteem and self-actualization. And we know this is not linear. We go up and down and all across this triangle. But at the end of the day, if we can provide physiological safety, physical safety, basic needs, food, shelter, somewhere to sleep at night, somewhere to sleep during the day, being able to provide for yourself, then these other things get to exist in the world and for our young folks. So I want to talk about our practice framework, and that's going to actually inform, the rest of this. We're going to kind of talk about, I'm going to share some statistics. I don't love sharing statistics all the time, but it also tells the truth about what's going on. But then at the end, we'll talk about what KYC is doing in response to some of the recommendations. But this framework of transformative justice is really important to me because it's about seeking to transform conditions that cause or allowed harm to occur. When I first started in undergrad, as a social worker, they always would say, like, our goal is to work ourselves out of a job. But nobody talked about how to do that. And so the best case scenario is to truly dig up the systems and the conditions and things that have allowed for us to be where we are in our communities so that we don't need to keep putting Band-Aids on. We don't need to keep being in a space of intervention. Or intervention happens, but we're more into prevention. And so that's the lens through which we approach our work and have developed our programs. My lights are flickering here. I know folks have lost power throughout the state, so we'll see what happens. But this model that we utilize to inform the work, and I do my own personal practice, is understanding that like our liberation is fundamentally entwined. And the difference between freedom and liberation is freedom is if somebody, I have a cat, right? And if I put my cat in a cage and I open the door, she's free to leave. But being liberated are having conditions that make her want to leave that cage and that she can still be safe once she leaves there. And so we want that not just for ourselves, it's very intersectional. We also understand that the conditions that allowed an oppression or harm to occur, we've got to transform those. So that goes back to, I always think about gardening. I'm not a gardener, but I use the analogy all the time, is digging up those weeds and digging up the things that wouldn't allow plants and things to flourish. That's those conditions. And then knowing, the systemic responses not only fail to advance individual and collective justice, but it also perpetuates those cycles. And so that really comes down to, we cannot do what we've always done. So I'm really glad that you all are here because I love to talk about ways that we get to do things differently and hopefully ways that as, educators and social workers and other providers, we can begin to or continue to solidify around the work that needs to be done. So we're here to talk about the complexities of supporting youth who are marginalized, whether that's, I like to say, Black and Brown youth, LGBTQI+ youth, different abilities, disabled youth. I mean, the list goes on, but people who are marginalized is anyone who's not part of the dominant or mainstream culture. So we're gonna look at racial equity and intersectionality and talk about some best practices and maybe some lessons that we've definitely learned along the way for vulnerable youth who are experiencing homelessness. We know that LGBTQI+ youth and young adults are more than twice as likely to experience homelessness as their non-LGBTQ peers, which is about 120% more likely. And then also represent about 40% of the entire homeless population. So in the general population, there's about 7% of youth who are part of the LGBTQ community, but they represent 40%. So there's a large disparity in overrepresentation there. Here in Central Ohio and in 2019, I know Measurement Resources said there are approximately 3,000, maybe 3,200 youth that were identified as being homeless or housing insecure here in Central Ohio. That's about 11 counties. And that point in time count is where a lot of that information came from. So if we use anecdotal numbers, the 40%, there's an estimated 1,200 LGBTQI+ youth who are homeless or housing insecure in Central Ohio. And I think it's important to know that we have to estimate, because we don't have the current mechanisms fully to collect that data, that demographic data. And so when we're doing the point in time or doing those counts, we're not necessarily asking if a young person, how they identify. We're not necessarily, and that's because those places aren't always a safe place for youth to do that. And some places just don't know that it's that important. Fortunately, we have some funding from ODH and through data collection, and we finally have gotten our, we don't use HMIS, we use a different system, but I'm really excited because that data around our young people is actually going to be counted and be available. And so I'm very excited about the possibilities for that. But the other challenge here is that our young folks don't always meet the criteria to be certified as homeless under HUD guidelines. And so, you know, being literally homeless or at risk for literal homelessness 14 days away. First of all, we don't want our youth to be on the streets or in unsafe situations if possible. That's that preventative work. But unfortunately, they won't qualify to be in the system. And so we offer things that are very low barrier to where we hopefully can prevent the actual experience of literal homelessness when possible. Family conflict is truly the most common cause of all youth homelessness. For LGBTQ youth, it's typically around their sexual orientation and gender identity. We also, you know, we've got housing insecurity, homelessness, but we like to use the phrase vulnerable housing. And so maybe there's not conflict where it's escalated and they're not being kicked out and the young person can stay in their home, but they're also being misgendered.
Uh-oh. I know she was saying that her power is flickering. Am I the only one that lost audio, or did everybody lose audio?
No, she's frozen.
Yeah.
Okay. Screen share is still up. I'll send her a chat real quick, just so she knows. If she can get that.
While we're waiting to get her back, I'll do a quick plug for KYC. I mean, because we're all over the state on the call, KYC actually holds virtual youth programs, so they're accessible. I frequently, I follow them on Instagram. And then if I need to kind of push that out to a young person, I do. And they always are posting their calendars and whatnot. So I'll try to find their handle real quick on Instagram. I don't know, is that the young people cool term handle on Instagram? I don't know. But I'll see if I can find it so you guys can follow them. And again, they're just very supportive, you know, responsive, you know, on the ground, or totally love what they do.
Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up some of their remote work, Andrea, and it's very, very accessible on their website. So you can go on their website and get the information to get a youth connected to their remote work super easily. They have workshops for young people, life skills and coaching courses and different things like that for young people. And then when it comes to social media, if you are trying to improve your social media outreach, their approach to social media is super effective. They have some really strong social media campaigns that they do. So I second that. Definitely check out their Instagram and some of the virtual offerings that they have. So maybe we'll give Erin a minute or two, see if she makes it back in here. And if not, maybe we'll circle back to some of the discussion we were having. And we can check in. I'm sure Erin was probably going to get to this, but it would almost seem as though we planned to have this conversation during Pride Month and so close to Juneteenth, but it just ended up happening that way. I think that was like a sort of a kismet thing in terms of timing. So maybe if we have extra time, if anyone is doing anything in their district or in their community around those particular events, you know, would love to hear about any work that you're doing in that space while we wait here for a minute. And it looks like Andrea put the Instagram information in the chat, so you can check out their social media. Any thoughts on what we've heard so far? Anybody's having? Maybe teeing up questions or reflections for Erin already? Oh, I think we might have her back.
See if the video works. Hi, lost that power.
Hi.
Let's see what
You gave
happened.
us a fair warning.
I did. I was a little surprised. There
You are, okay. Oh, but you're muted. Let's see if we can hear you.
How's this?
Yeah,
We're
we hear
good.
you.
Yay,
Great.
welcome
We'll just keep on going. Thankful to this 18-year-old that helped me figure out hotspot. So we pick up where we left off.
Sure.
So as I was talking about the disparities and the overrepresentation, we know that homelessness or housing instability disproportionately impacts youth of color, or BIPOC youth, or Black and Brown youth, racial minorities. We know that Black and Hispanic young folks spend longer periods of time in homelessness than their white or non-Hispanic counterparts, increasing their risk of re-entering homelessness after exiting. And that's because those conditions that caused the issue are not changed. We do the thing where we do interventions. Among racial and ethnic groups, we know that Black youth are more overrepresented. So 83% higher risk of having experienced homelessness, which we know this again also mirrors those experiences around school suspensions, incarceration, foster care placement. And if you were to, deep dive into statistics around that, and for LGBTQ youth who are more likely to drop out of school because they're not safe conditions, and GLSEN's school climate survey, Ohio school climate was identified as one as the least safe for our young folks, then those rates continue to go up. We know the same for Latino or Latina young folks as well. There's 33% represent more homelessness, but only 19% are actually being served. And so when we look at this, I call this an oversimplified summary, as we know that our LGBTQ youth are more than double at risk of homelessness. There are higher rates of trauma and adversity, including twice the rate of early death. This especially rings true for our transgender and non-binary youth. And then it increases even more for our transgender non-binary youth of color. And there's multiple factors that lead to homelessness. And we know how these rates increase amongst racial minorities. And what's really going to be most important is those safe, affirming responses and services. So I'm going to talk about prevention and early intervention. What can we do? Let's be solution oriented. And what we know collectively, anecdotally, and even just, through lived experience, is if we look at the trajectory, there are plenty of opportunities for early intervention and prevention. That's why, with McKinney-Vento and having those coordinators and doing this work, it can happen at any, stop along the service providers or educators. We definitely need to jumpstart that work on early identification, or at least the risk, so that we can be more preventative. Engaging in or, disrupting family situations. As leaders in this system, there's of earning, and I think this word is so important, earning reputations as safe and affirming spaces. And what we like to say to folks is we appreciate folks who are welcoming, but we want folks to be affirming. It does go beyond pronouns. Pronouns are so important. It was simple, I introduced myself, my pronouns a couple of times. Before my power went out, it was been my name. I see Lisa has hers and many others. So pronouns are absolutely important, but it also goes beyond pronouns. And so as organizations or providers, educators, understanding like what that means to be safer and affirming for our young folks is very important, because our youth are more likely to avoid getting services if they don't feel safe. And then we need places of fast access to safe and stable housing. And I saw the comment about unaccompanied minors, which is very challenging. Here in Franklin County, we are fortunate to work with, they have Huckleberry House and Star House, which Huckleberry House starts at age 12 and Star House is at age 14. And so we're very fortunate to have them as a resource. Here are some of the recommendations from what we know from those statistics, is to provide that training to providers. We at Kaleidoscope, and I'll make sure there are links in the chat before we leave today for training. Yes, absolutely. I love the street cred. But we provide that. We have a partnership with Columbus City Schools to work with their offices so that we're able to cultivate what we call cultivating environments of affirmation and belonging, because the truth is that works for everyone. It's not so focused on sexual orientation, gender identity, because everybody has a sexual orientation and gender identity. And so when we use that phrase and we're cultivating those environments, if it's good for our queer youth, it's going to be good for all youth. Engaging youth we have a community advisory board at KYC, and like I said, we try our best to be youth-led, youth-informed, and youth-inspired in all that we do, and it is not always easy. It's a great thing to do, and it can be a challenge, and it can also slow things down. But that's the only way we're going to be able to be representative in the work that we're doing. If you just push that button, the alarm will stop doing that. The other piece is encouraging community organizations who are working with our young folks, runaway and homeless youth, to initiate the more sensitive data collection about sexual orientation, gender identity. We call that SOGIE data, so sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, SOGIE. And we're working here in Franklin County, and I know in different places across the state, to collect that information. But it's so important that we can be culturally responsive to the work. We have to know who's there in order to be able to respond. Looking at our federal grants and guidelines are very important so that we can better support our young folks. And so this one size fits all, it doesn't actually fit all, and it doesn't account for various circumstances. Sensitive, and having different options around these different communities. And then of course, let's evaluate the interventions that work, the people who are doing things differently. The more that we can support those and begin to evaluate what's happening, the more we can hopefully get funding. Of course, back to partnering with young folks, making sure that it is also racially diverse. And so supporting the Black and Hispanic young folks to co-create programs and services and strategies to reduce housing insecurity, preventing homelessness. They live on the street. They know what's out there. They know what's possible. They also have really amazing survival skills. We have a rapid rehousing program, which we'll talk about in a moment, but in I think it was early 2019, maybe into 2018, we had a young person who was in our program, and he was essentially Airbnb-ing his apartment. So he was staying somewhere else and having people pay him to live in his apartment. And, while we appreciated the entrepreneurial spirit and nature of that, like that wasn't okay. But instead of just kicking him out or what's the word I'm looking for? Getting into trouble, guilting him, we talked about that and like what are some of the ways these skills or strategies could be used to support yourself moving forward. But it's being willing to respect the hustle, right? And to be able to maybe redirect what they're doing. And it's also having a sense of humor in this work. Street outreach programs around the fluid housing situations are so important, not just based on where they were last, which is kind of around that being certified as homeless. and designing and delivering services that enter those experiences. And again, that's where you need the those with that lived experiences, but also looking at immediate needs and appropriate services. Building in opportunities to understand trauma. It's hard because sometimes our youth get bounced through different providers in one system. And so having to retell their story can be really hard. And so having almost this universal approach to being healing centered and trauma informed is very supportive. And then I just can't go back and say enough about this data to address racial inequities in the community. And of course, advocacy work for more expansive and diverse investments and funding for non-traditional and innovative programs. We've been very blessed, and this is because of COVID, where monies are being offered to organizations. We've been able to do a lot of our work with COVID relief funds without a lot of stipulations placed on it, which I love that. And I really hope this trend continues because it allows us to serve folks without strings attached and really meet those needs more immediately. And so this is some of the work that we're doing at KOIC, which is responsive to all the recommendations and the best practices, but also in support of that transformative justice approach. We have our rapid rehousing program, which I'm sure you're likely familiar with, but basically it's getting youth into housing as soon as possible and providing move-in or rental assistance. The way that we are doing this a bit differently, as I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned that, but I'll tell you now, we don't need any HUD funding because of the barriers that tend to present with that. And so we do have funding from the Attorney General's office for VOCA funding, the Victim of Crime Act, and we move our young folks in and then we pay their rent, and we do what's considered graduated progressive engagement where they can pay their own rent. In terms of length of time, which is another reason that you're able to do things different, we don't really have a lot of barriers on the length of time. It's when they're ready, because we want to prevent them re-entering into homelessness. So we currently have 4 youth in rapid rehousing, and we have one for sure who's about to be able to transition to being living independently, and another one that's on the way. And they're a little over 2 years in our program. And that feels important because we allow them to take their time. And there've been those setbacks because our young folks, in particular, our trans non-binary youth and our trans binary youth of color, are sometimes have a difficulty maintaining employment. And so we know folks re-enter homelessness often because they can't afford their housing. And so we've been able to support our young folks through those changes in employment or getting into educational programs for sustainability. We also have money to provide identity documents or other things that are barriers to them getting into programs. We have a supportive co-housing program, and essentially it's a supportive, intentional community. And so we've got 2 sites right now. They're duplexes on different sides of the city. And we can house, hold on, get this right, 6 young folks in our new one and 3 in our current one. And it's similar to like being in, well, I remember when I was in college, like I had roommates in a shared living, like a suite. And that's kind of what it's like. And so we're able to work with a lot of our young folks. Oh man, those traditional things with like roommate disagreement and things of like, we help them work through those conflicts, which is actually part of being 18 to 20. There's no, but for our youth and what we've learned is it's one thing to take a young person off the street and put them in a program, but then that's where that trauma-informed and healing center work comes in. We're taking them away from their family and their communities, and survival mode often, they're still not able to trust the systems. And so we've learned within the first probably 9 crisis stabilization period with our supportive co-housing, rapid rehousing, where we don't really push them around any goals, housing goals, but we're like, how can we get you stabilized? How can we let you know this is a safe place to be? How can we help them know that maybe they've been disrupted from their families, their built families, and we're trying to create new relationships. We are almost done. I promise we're going to get All right, and we have a couple more and we'll be done. We can do it. We have emergency housing, which is a supported stay for a minimum of 2 weeks. And so this is because, especially for LGBTQI plus youth and all youth, shelters typically aren't the safest place for them to stay. We have a partnership with an extended stay and some other halls. And essentially, if a young person needs emergency housing, we're able to put them into those. That's kind of like a bridge housing as well. It's not quite a shelter, but we put them in a room and they can stay there. And then at 2 weeks at a time, we continue to reassess the need. We're really fortunate to be able to transition a lot of our young people to independent housing from our emergency housing program, which has been a really where emergency rental assistance ERA that we're to folks here in Franklin County. And my favorite part is that money is, at least through KYC, is really no strings attached. So we're able to pay rent, move-in assistance, utility assistance. We paid, I think, somebody's rent for 18 months. They were behind last month. I think it was about $27,000. And I remember when I was approving the check, I was like, how are they able to stay there for that long? But they were, and it was just this really beautiful thing. And when I talk about being subversive and strategic, I can't tell you how good it feels to use government money and not have a whole bunch of stipulations for folks to know that they can maintain their housing. And we even extend that. It is for young folks 18 and 24 and households that have young people within their homes. None of our housing programs, although we center the needs of LGBTQ youth and young adults, we don't profile, we don't make folks prove their sexual orientation or gender identity, but we do center those needs. And so this is the key piece to our housing programs. They're low barrier, as I said, intersectional and equity informed. The extended participation, like I share with the rapid rehousing, everybody in housing gets a case manager. We support with identity documents. For some of our youth, that could be name change. Took a strengths finders test years ago. Strengths was adaptability. And I'm telling you, if that's not being tested today, I don't know what is. Talked about the case management, the documents, and then therapy. We do provide in-house therapy at no cost to our young folks. And that's therapy is for ages 12 to 24. We do provide case management. I'm done. This isn't working. Did you get back on your phone?
Lisa, we can't hear you either.
Hello?
Hello, yeah.
How about now? Oh, guys, who would have thought? I mean, add to our values, patience, patience and technology fluidity, right? Erin, what an angel to find a hot spot, keep it going, keep it moving. And the storms are flaring, and like I can really very much like feel the energy of the weather, and it is taking over our Zoom today. So it looks like Erin might be back in here, so definitely invite her to share anything she is able to at any point. But I just wanted to come back on and thank everybody for their patience as we have been talking through this really important topic. Just going to give Erin a second in case you wanted to maybe share any kind of close the loop thoughts. Well, lots of good news. Good news is Erin and I are already in conversation about her presenting at the next Ohio McKinney-Vento Network session on LGBTQ plus and BIPOC youth. So this is not the last we'll see of her. So we'll be digging back into this content most certainly. Erin also provided us the full slide deck, so you will have access to that on our website. You'll also have access to this recording. So if there was something that you wanted to go back and re-listen to, you'll have access to that. It seems like today might be a good day to just start wrapping it up early. We've all put in a lot of patience and time here. So maybe what we could do is just take a moment and go around the room and just share one closing thought and just quickly kind of popcorn that. And then I'll make sure and pull up the slide that shows when our next session is, so you can have that on your calendar. And then we'll just call it a day, and we'll buy back a little bit of our time here. So if we could maybe.
Hey, Lisa.
Oh, hello. Hi.
Hey, Erin calling in. I hate things without proper closure. So
Absolutely. I said if Erin comes back, I'm going to give her the floor to like run a thread through and close the loop on the content. So if you want to say some closing words, please feel welcome to.
I would love to. Thank you so much for that. My understanding is everybody has copies of the slides. The only thing that I have left to share was just around sometimes when this transformative work can be radical. And, at the end of the day, we want to create environments and situations where our young folks don't have to be resilient to just work with us. And those are just a few examples of doing things differently. Happy to answer any questions, especially as it relates to working with schools and educators or throughout the summer. And happy to also follow up with anybody offline. Our contact information is also in the slides. And then we have so many different programs. If you go to our website, kycohio.org, you can see about some of our other programs. We have a drop-in center. We do the education and training. We have GSA networks and some civic engagement and advocacy work. So all of that is included on our website as well. And as I said, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
In one of our little moments here where you got disconnected, somebody was uplifting the virtual spaces that you've been creating for young people. So young people in different counties in Franklin County can access KYC services. So I wanted to let you know that people in this room are already talking about that and taking advantage of that. People are sharing your social media handle and admiring some of the ways that you all get information and awareness out there through social media. So a couple of little quick things that you missed when you were getting back connected. But anybody have any questions for Erin before we go around and do closeout? I think there was a question in the chat. I'm going to go back through and look for that for a second. But if you have a question for Erin, come off mute and ask it, please.
I do appreciate that about Discord. When COVID started, we definitely needed to adjust that our youth could still be engaged. And in doing that, we realized it also expanded the accessibility. And so we do have youth across the state, regionally. We've got some in different states who are actually connecting with us. And so even though we are back in person at our drop-in center, which is open Tuesday through Friday, for ages 12 to 20, we are doing some hybrid programming as well. And all of that is on our website where we have our calendar about which programs are being offered when. We also provide monthly meetings for 18 to 24-year-olds, for parents and caregivers, and then for youth who are 12 and under.
Thanks, Erin. I was just pulling up the slide that has, I put a link to your website on these slides too, so just showing folks where that is. Anybody else have any questions for
I
Aaron.
think
We had
I
one
do.
question in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
I'm going to ask for forgiveness before I begin. This isn't general. How do you deal in your work with the reality is that we have a system that is not only intolerant of these youth, but absolutely opposed to them and continuing to set up structures to get in the way of the very work that you're doing? All of us are in some way involved in public funding, and I spend a lifetime trying to be sensitive to that. But I'm trying to figure out how our sensitivity to the nuances of using public funding can balance with the fact that that entire political structure is absolutely diametrically opposed to serving these youth. How do you move about that? I mean, go ahead.
Mhm. No, I no need to ask for forgiveness. That's a really excellent question. And it's hard. And, it's unfortunate because what is happening is the questioning of the humanity and dignity of individuals and communities is what's actually coming out of that. And I find it really disgusting and it's disappointing. And what we navigate at multiple levels. And so on the more macro systemic level, we are working in partnership with other organizations to testify, to oppose it, to show up at hearings, to do, to contact our legislatures. We do all of those things in writing letters, making sure the community understands what some of this legislation actually means. And so what you're, I'm guessing, referencing, there's 3 House bills right now. One is 616, which some folks are referring to it like Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. In Ohio, we're trying to say, don't say gay, but don't mention race. It's very intersectional. And so as you all are likely aware, it's kind of 2-pronged. One is talking about not introducing sexual orientation or gender identity conversations in K through 12. And then also not talking about critical race theory, intersectionality, anything that they determine to be divisive or that might spark inherited guilt.
Or that flies in the face of a bunch of old white guys. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
I should move.
I think sometimes it sounds like that you're a person who can say that easier than I can at times. But it's silly. One, it's just really silly. My comms people won't let me just say that. Also, when you look at it, it's like everyone has a sexual orientation and gender identity. So not talking about it is like you're not talking about anybody's life, number one, even though we know it's targeted. But then the other bills, like banning gender affirming care, which is House Bill 454, is trying to create a problem where there isn't a problem. Gender affirming care is very simply, it can be as simple as using affirmed pronouns and names. And anything else that happens from a medical perspective is through standards of care, it's through informed consent, it's through doctors. And it would, if they were to pass it, it would take away funding from Children's Hospital, Nationwide Children's Hospital, not just around gender affirming care, like it's going to impact everybody. But I think it's Medicaid funding, and they said it's over 50% of the people they serve there, right? And then there's the other one is House Bill 61 around saving women's sports and not letting, trans or non-binary girls play with their affirmed teams. And so all of this is a challenge. We try to fight at the state house level. We try to do the work of changing hearts and minds in the community to understand how harmful this is. We try to do the work of education. People are scared of what they don't know. And ultimately, which is really like my main job, is protecting our young folks. That's what we're supposed to do as adults, is protect them and do whatever we can. And so when those conversations get lifted up and people make the disparaging comments and remarks, like for me, it's getting on that kind of like in the space of not on my watch. I'm not going to let harm come to them if I can. And so we continue to just do the work that we're doing, being creative with funding, being creative with the way that we're raising money and talking to our stakeholders so that we can continue to do the work. I've already decided that as a licensed social worker, if there was a hill for me to lose my license, it will be on this, because I will not stop doing the work of affirming and providing safer places for our youth.
Thank you so much, Erin. Such a thoughtful response to that question. I think that's a really intentional note to wrap up our session on today. I feel like I want to invite folks to hold your thoughts and instead reflect on Erin's words from today, and just really let that sink in and think through how we can operationalize these thoughts, right? And sometimes it's words, when really we need just more thought, right? More reflecting and thought on what we're hearing. So let's just take a little time to let that sink in. I want to invite folks to share one word that represents how you're walking out of today and how you're walking out of community of practice in the chat. So if you want to take a moment and share one word in the chat that represents, or a couple of words, whatever suits you best, on how you're walking out of community of practice today. The chat's a very safe space for you here. I won't uplift anything. I'll just let that be something that folks can leave. And I'm going to put a little bit of music on to get us out of here for the afternoon. I want to thank everybody for your endurance through some of this weird storm energy and this interesting time where we're both celebrating Pride and amping up for Juneteenth, but also battening down the hatches and really thinking about people who are unstably housed in these intense summer weather conditions. So let's hold both of those things, and we'll come back together month after next. I think we'll send out lots of reminders, as we always do. Our calendar's on the website. And I thank you all so much for being here today. And if you need anything at all, you know where we are, and don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.
Take care.
Thank you.